All right, so you guys wanted a deep dive on the Emma Granger case, specifically the early days. And I got to say, it's a lot to unpack.
It really is a fascinating case.
Yeah, so we're looking at episode 3 of The Vanishing of Emma Granger, this true crime podcast.
Yeah.
And this episode is called Chasing Shadows.
Oh, yeah, I see why they called it that.
Right, like it's all about those dead ends and the frustration of those first few weeks.
Yeah, very fitting.
So just to recap, we're talking about Emma Granger, 23-year-old college student, last seen at this bar, the Blue Lantern, and then poof, gone.
It's like she vanished into thin air.
And the episode really digs into how confusing that initial investigation was.
Right, because the police had no idea if she left on her own or if it was something, more sinister.
Yeah, they really had no starting point.
It makes you wonder, how do you even begin to investigate when you don't know if a crime has actually been committed?
Exactly. And the detective who was leading the case actually said, Emma's case was unusual from the start. We had no signs of a struggle, no obvious motive, and no leads other than the sighting of that man at the bar. We had to consider everything, from her going off on her own to something more sinister. It's like, how do you even solve a puzzle when you don't know which pieces are missing?
It's a tough spot to be in, and it often means valuable time is lost in those early stages.
And in the meantime, Emma's family and friends weren't just sitting around,
Oh, no, they were incredibly proactive.
The podcast talks about them organizing all these search parties, putting flyers everywhere, just trying to reach anyone who might have even glimpsed Emma.
It's heartbreaking, but also inspiring to see that level of determination.
It really is, and especially from Emma's mother, Laura.
Oh, she was a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, she was determined to keep Emma's case from going cold, and she became such a vocal advocate.
She was quoted as saying, "I knew Emma wouldn't just leave. She had plans, dreams. She would have let someone know. I couldn't sit back and just wait." You can just feel the urgency in her words.
It's like a mother's intuition kicking in.
And it was right around this time that the media really latched onto the story.
Yeah, it blew up pretty quickly, didn't it?
Emma's case became national news almost overnight.
And that's when things get really complicated because media attention, it can be such a double-edged sword.
Right. On the one hand, you want the public's help. You want to keep the case in the spotlight.
But on the other hand, you don't want things to spiral out of control.
You don't want the investigation to be derailed by rumors or speculation.
And this episode, Chasing Shadows, it really shows how that played out in Emma's case.
Yeah, it's a classic example of what can happen.
Like all these tips came flooding in, but most of them led to dead ends.
There was that gas station sighting that turned out to be nothing.
And that anonymous phone call that went nowhere?
It's just a constant cycle of hope and disappointment.
Exactly. And not just for the investigators, but for Emma's loved ones, too.
And throughout all of this, we have this mysterious man lurking in the background, the one who was seen with Emma at the Blue Lantern.
Right. And to this day, he remains unidentified.
It's like a ghost story.
And the security footage from the bar, it's so grainy, you can't really make out any details.
So we're left with this huge question mark hanging over the investigation.
Was he just some random guy who happened to be there that night?
Or did he have something to do with Emma's disappearance?
And then just when it seems like the trail has gone cold, investigators make a discovery that changes everything. An unsent message on Emma's phone.
Oh, yeah, that's where things take a really dark turn.
The message just said, "It's not safe. He's watching." It's chilling, right?
Chilling is an understatement.
Like suddenly there's a sense of imminent danger.
And so many questions. Who is he? Why didn't she send the message?
Was she interrupted? Did she decide against it at the last minute?
And is there a connection between this he and the unidentified man from the bar?
Ugh, so many questions, so few answers. And it seems like investigators would be trying to track down any digital trace of this he figure, especially since they weren't getting anywhere in the physical world.
Absolutely. This is where the investigation starts to move into the digital realm.
And that's a whole other story.
It really is.
So buckle up, everyone, because in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore Emma's digital footprint and the unsettling things that investigators found there.
It's a wild ride.
It really is. So stay tuned.
Welcome back. So this is where things get really interesting. We've been talking about the physical investigation, all the searches and interviews.
Right, the real world stuff.
Exactly. But now we're diving into Emma's digital footprint.
It's like a whole other dimension to the case.
It is. And it's amazing how much our online lives can reveal about us.
Like every click, every post, every message, it all leaves a trace.
And for investigators, that digital trail can be a gold mine, especially when they're hitting dead ends in the physical world.
So in Emma's case, what were they looking for specifically? The podcast mentions a disturbing digital trail, but they don't really go into detail.
Well, they'd be looking at everything her social media posts, likes, comments, direct messages, emails, browsing history, even online shopping.
Wow, they really leave no stone unturned.
Not in a case like this. They need to know everything they need to see if there are any red flags, anything that stands out.
Like what kind of red flags?
Well, were there any signs of a stalker? Was someone harassing her online? Did she have a secret relationship? Someone she was meeting in person that her friends and family didn't know about?
And what about this idea of a double life that the podcast mentions?
Ah, yes, that's a key piece of the puzzle. It suggests that Emma might have been presenting a different version of herself online, maybe engaging in activities or connecting with people that she kept hidden from her offline life.
It's almost like investigators are trying to piece together two separate puzzles, one in the real world and one in the digital world.
Exactly, and they're hoping that those puzzles will eventually overlap and give them the complete picture.
And sometimes that digital trail, it can be the key to cracking the case.
No, absolutely. There have been so many cases where online activity has led to a breakthrough.
Like what kind of cases?
Well, there was that case of Morgan Ingram. She disappeared in 2017, and the police were initially stumped. But when they looked into her online activity, they find out she'd been talking to this guy she met on a dating app.
Oh.
He ended up being their prime suspect.
Wow. So in Emma's case, did they find anything concrete in her online activity? Any indication of a threat or suspicious communication or someone she was secretly meeting?
The podcast keeps it pretty vague at this point, probably to build suspense.
Ugh, I hate when they do that.
But the fact that they use the word disturbing to describe her digital trail, well, it definitely suggests they found something unsettling, something that raised more questions than answers.
Okay, so let's speculate what could be so disturbing about her online activity. Was there a specific person she was interacting with that raised red flags? Or was it something else entirely?
It's hard to say for sure. It could be anything from evidence of cyberstalking to signs that she was involved in something risky, something she kept hidden from everyone.
We also have to consider the possibility that the man from the bar, the unsent message, and this disturbing digital trail, they're all connected somehow.
It's definitely possible. Imagine this. Emma meets this guy online. Things start to escalate, and they decide to meet in person at the Blue Lantern. Something happens. Emma feels threatened and tries to send a message for help, but she doesn't manage to send it.
Or maybe the he in the message refers to someone completely different, someone she met online who was stalking her or manipulating her.
It's like a tangled web.
And every time investigators think they're getting close to something, it slips away.
It's the nature of these kinds of cases, especially in the digital age. There's so much information to sift through.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack made of data.
Exactly. And then you have the whole issue of privacy. You know, investigators are digging through someone's personal life, their most intimate conversations.
It's a slippery slope. Where do we draw the line?
It's a tough question, and one that we're still grappling with as a society. You know, digital forensics is a relatively new field, and we're still figuring out the ethical and legal implications.
But there's no doubt that technology has changed the way we investigate crimes.
It's a game changer.
So we've talked about the physical investigation, we've talked about the digital investigation, but there's another aspect to this case that we haven't really touched on yet, the role of the media and the rise of online sleuths.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
It really is, and that's exactly what we'll be diving into in the final part of our deep dive.
Buckle up.
We'll explore how the media shaped the narrative around Emma's case, the impact of online sleuthing communities, and the ethical dilemmas of citizen investigation. It's a fascinating and complex topic, so stay tuned. So we've really dug into the nitty-gritty of that initial investigation and all the twists and turns in Emma's digital life. But I think it's important to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Right. This case, it's not just about finding Emma. It's about understanding how her story fits into these larger conversations we're having about technology and privacy and the way we consume information.
It's like a microcosm of this whole digital age we live in.
Exactly. It forces us to confront all these complexities and ethical dilemmas that come up when our online and offline lives collide.
And speaking of complexities, we talked about the media's role earlier, but I think it deserves a closer look.
Yeah.
Did all that media attention ultimately help or hurt the investigation in Emma's case?
It's funny, the impact of media attention in these cases, it's always a topic of debate. There's no easy answer.
Right, because on one hand, you want to keep the case in the public eye. You want people to be aware and maybe come forward with information.
Exactly. But on the other hand, you don't want the investigation to be bombarded with misinformation and rumors.
Remember the Natalie Holloway case?
Oh, yeah, the media coverage was insane.
It was like every new theory, every alleged sighting just made things more confusing.
And with social media these days, the potential for misinformation to spread is even greater.
It's a double-edged sword for sure. Like those same platforms that can help spread awareness can also become breeding grounds for speculation and conspiracy theories.
The tough balance.
And then you have this whole other layer with the online sleuths.
Oh, yeah, those internet detectives.
It's fascinating how these communities dedicate so much time and energy to cracking cases that have stumped law enforcement.
It really is,
Man.
but it also raises some questions. Is it actually helpful, or can it backfire and interfere with the official investigation?
Because there have been cases where online sleuths have actually made a real difference, haven't they?
Oh, for sure. There was that case where a bunch of Reddit users helped identify a hit-and-run suspect by analyzing security footage.
It's incredible what they were able to do.
But then you also have those cases where online sleuths jump to conclusions based on very little evidence and end up accusing innocent people.
And that can have real-world consequences.
Exactly. So it's all about finding that balance, that responsible approach to citizen investigation.
Right, working collaboratively with law enforcement, respecting the privacy of those involved, and remembering that these are real people's lives we're talking about.
It's crucial to be mindful of the potential impact of our actions in the digital world.
Like one careless post or hastily shared theory can have a ripple effect that goes far beyond the online space.
Absolutely. Words have power.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something that's been on my mind, that unsent message on Emma's phone. It's not safe. He's watching.
Oh, yeah, that's a chilling one.
It really sends shivers down your spine. It makes you think about how technology can be used not just to connect us, but also to control and manipulate and even harm.
It's a reminder that the digital world is not some separate entity. It's an extension of our lives, and the consequences of our actions online can be just as real and significant as those in the physical world.
Emma's case. It really highlights so many important things. It shows us the power and the potential dangers of technology, and it forces us to confront these ethical gray areas where our digital and physical lives intersect.
It's a story that makes you stop and think.
It does, and it reminds us of how precious life is and how important it is to cherish our connections with others.
Well said. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has. Thanks for joining us as we explored this complex and compelling case. We'll definitely be keeping an eye out for any updates on Emma's story, and we encourage you to do the same. Remember, even the smallest piece of information could be the key to bringing her home.